My wife handed me 13 reasons for leaving me, but I gave her one reason that made her beg to stay. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now, let's start the video. I guess I should start with some background. I, 35 male, met my wife, Amber, 33, female, right after I finished my last contract as a private military contractor. I was transitioning back to civilian life, looking at corporate security management positions. She was working as a paralegal at this fancy law firm downtown, looking all professional and put together. Seemed like she had her together, you know? We dated for 2 years, got married, bought a modest 3-bedroom in the suburbs, the whole American dream package. I eventually landed a job as security director for a chain of luxury hotels, making about $110,000 a year. Not Jeff Bezos money, but decent enough that I never thought money would be an issue in our marriage. Amber continued working at the law firm, though she cut back to part-time after a few years, claiming the stress was too much. I supported her decision because I thought we were partners. Fast forward to 3 months ago. I was looking for our tax documents in Amber's desk. We've been married 10 years, by the way. And found this letter she typed up. It was titled 15 Reasons Why Our 10-Year Marriage Should End. Yeah, that's right. A bullet point list explaining why I wasn't worth staying with anymore. My gut reaction was like someone punched me in the stomach hard. I literally couldn't breathe for a second. But then this weird calm came over me. I don't usually get cold and calculated. I'm normally the emotional type. Thanks military training for helping me control that. But something snapped inside me. I read through her points one by one. Get this: insufficient income for desired lifestyle. We live comfortably, but apparently not Instagram-worthy enough. Embarrassing job. Protecting people is embarrassing. Doesn't understand my needs for luxury. I bought her a $3,000 Gucci bag last Christmas that she used twice. Refusing to consider moving to a more affluent neighborhood. Too frugal with money. I call it responsible. Won't let me quit my job to pursue my passion project. Her unprofitable online boutique that's never made a dime. The craziest one. Not ambitious enough to reach our potential. Our potential. Like my whole purpose was to be her goddamn ATM. There were others about emotional availability but it was clear what this was really about. Money and status. I'm too average for her now. I put it back exactly where I found it. Didn't confront her. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. That's what she'd expect. That's what the old Jake would have done. But this wasn't time for emotions or pleading like some desperate loser. This required strategy. It was obvious this had been brewing for months, and I'd been too busy trying to provide a comfortable life to notice our foundation was crumbling underneath us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just laid there next to her, thinking, who the is this gold-digging stranger sleeping beside me? The next week was an eye-opener. I started paying attention to things I'd been missing. She was always checking her phone with this little smile. She'd dress up extra nice on days she was just running errands, full makeup, hair done, designer outfits I paid for. She'd get this nervous energy when her friends called, especially this new friend group she'd made at her Pilates class. All wealthy trophy wives with rich husbands in finance and real estate. The red flags were everywhere. She started making comments about her coworker Stacy's husband, who just made partner at his law firm and could now afford a vacation home, or about how her college friend Jessica married up and never has to worry about money again. It was like living with someone who was constantly comparing our life to some reality TV show. That Friday at dinner, she brings up how her friend Megan just got divorced. She got the house in Westlake, half his retirement, and $9,000 a month in alimony, my wife says, watching me over her wine glass. She's dating this hedge fund manager now. Sometimes I wonder what that kind of freedom feels like. I just nodded and asked if she wanted more wine. The confused look on her face was satisfying as hell. She was fishing for a reaction, for drama, for something to justify what she was planning. I gave her nothing. That night, while she slept, I checked our joint accounts. Turns out she'd been making transfers to a separate account for 3 months. $500 here, $700 there. Nothing that would raise alarm bells if you weren't looking for it. But it was clear as day to me now. She was building an escape fund. Classic move. I made a decision right there. I wouldn't fight to convince her to stay. I wouldn't beg. Wouldn't try to manipulate her emotions. That's weak. Instead, I'd show her exactly what losing me meant. Not through words, but through action. And if she wanted war, I'd give her war. Next morning, I got up early, hit the gym harder than usual, and started making calls. First, my army buddy Steve, who's now a divorce attorney, then my old platoon sergeant Mike, who's a financial advisor. I needed to protect myself while creating the perfect environment for her to show her true intentions. I've always been in decent shape from my military days, but I'd gotten comfortable. Time to get back to fighting weight. I started hitting the gym at 5 a.m. every day before work. Downloaded a meal plan, cut out all the junk food completely. During this time, I started noticing little things about Amber I'd somehow missed. How she'd roll her eyes when I talked about saving for our future. How she'd forget to tell me about charges on our credit card until the bill came. How she always had some reason why we needed to upgrade something in the house, the car, her wardrobe. She noticed the change in me immediately. The way I kept distance. How I made decisions without consulting her. The way I stopped sending my usual check-in text during the day. When she asked if something was wrong, I just smiled and said, just focusing on some personal goals. She looked annoyed that I wasn't sharing details. Are you going to tell me what these personal goals are? She asked with that entitled tone she developed. When they're achieved, I replied and walked away. The look of confusion on her face was priceless. By Monday, I'd secured copies of all our important documents. By Wednesday, I had a clear picture of our financial situation and what a separation would actually look like for both of us. Knowledge is power, and I was arming myself while she thought I was clueless. I also did something I'd been putting off for years. I connected with an old commander who'd been trying to recruit me for this elite private security firm that protects high-net-worth individuals and corporate executives. The salary nearly triple what I was making now. But I'd always said no because it would mean more travel and I wanted to be home with Amber. What a joke that seemed. Now the question wasn't if our marriage would survive anymore. The question was if she deserved the chance to stay. After she made that list, the ball was in my court. And I was about to show her that throwing me away would be the biggest mistake of her life. Not by begging, but by becoming the man she couldn't afford to lose. A man with options, boundaries, and self-respect. I changed our routine completely. Started waking up earlier, often gone before she even woke up. My schedule became unpredictable. Some nights I'd be home for dinner. Others I'd text a simple working late with no explanation. The confusion on her face grew every day. You're never around anymore, she complained one night. I'm starting to feel like a single woman. How interesting, I replied. Is that what you want? She backpedaled immediately. That's not what I meant. I just miss you. Was all I said before going back to my book. I could feel her staring at me, trying to figure out what had changed. 2 weeks after finding her list, I joined this high-end gym downtown and hired a personal trainer. I bought new clothes that actually fit me better. Nothing flashy, just upgraded from department store to higher quality. Got a haircut at a fancy barber shop. Not major changes, but enough that people noticed. When she commented on my appearance during dinner, I just shrugged and said, just needed some changes. The way she studied me afterward told me everything. She was recalculating my value in her head, like she was seeing me with fresh eyes and didn't like that other women might be seeing the same thing. I created distance in other ways, too. Our weekend brunches became solo trips for me. Meeting some colleagues to discuss a project, I'd say, not giving her a chance to join. Truth was simpler. I was building a life that didn't revolve around her approval. Through mutual friends, I found out her friend Megan had been filling her head with freedom fantasies for months. Men are replaceable, and the dating pool is better than ever, were apparently their favorite topics. This friend had turned bitter after her husband left her for someone younger. A detail my wife conveniently never mentioned. Megan didn't get the great divorce settlement she bragged about either. Another convenient omission. One Thursday afternoon, I was going through some old boxes in our storage room looking for some paperwork when I found a journal Amber had kept during the early years of our marriage. I know it's not cool to read someone's private stuff, but given what I'd already discovered, I felt justified. What I read confirmed everything I suspected and worse. Early entries were loving, talking about our future together. But entries from about 2 years ago started changing. Met Jay's husband today. He just bought her a beach house for their anniversary. Why can't Jake be more ambitious? And Megan says I settled too young. Says, I could have landed someone with real money if I'd waited. The most recent entry was from just a month before. Richard says, I deserve better than what Jake can provide. He's right. I've wasted my prime years on someone who will never understand the lifestyle I deserve. Richard, who the freak was? Richard, I did some digging. Richard Davis was a senior partner at her law firm. Married, 50s, known for mentoring young paralegals. I checked our phone records. Dozens of calls and texts between them, often late at night or early morning when I was at the gym. The pieces were falling into place. One evening, I invited colleagues over, something I rarely did. Not my usual work buddies, but new connections from the elite security firm I was interviewing with, successful, ambitious people who talked about 7-figure contracts and international assignments. One guy casually mentioned his vacation home in Bali. Another talked about how his wife just started her own nonprofit because money wasn't an issue anymore. I noticed how my wife lingered nearby, hanging on every word, her eyes widening at the mention of the kind of lifestyle she clearly craved. Her narrative about me was being challenged by outside perspectives. She was seeing what I was capable of becoming without her. After they left, she was unusually attentive. Your friends seem really successful, she said, trying to sound casual. They're at the top of their field, I replied. They work incredibly hard. You never mentioned you knew people like that, she said, clearly fishing. There's a lot we haven't been talking about lately, isn't there? I responded, holding her gaze until she looked away. Her attempts to reconnect became obvious, wearing dresses I complimented months ago, making my favorite meals for no reason, suggesting weekend getaways like we used to, but I maintained emotional distance, saying thanks, but never showing enthusiasm. One random Tuesday, she decided to wear lingerie under her robe when I got home from work, like I was supposed to drop everything and worship her. I looked at her, said, I'm not really in the mood. Long day. And went to take a shower. The stunned look on her face was worth every second of the cold shower I took after. On a Thursday night, I deliberately took a call in front of her. My contact at the elite firm offering me the position. $295,000 base salary plus performance bonuses that could push it over $400,000. Significantly more travel, but the company provides accommodations in every major city. I accepted immediately, watching her expression change from casual interest to sudden attention. You took a new job without discussing it with me, she asked after I hung up, her voice a mix of shock and what sounded like panic. It's been in process for weeks, I said calmly. I didn't want to jinx it by talking about it too soon. But what about us? That sounds like you'll be gone all the time. I thought you wanted financial growth, I replied. Isn't that what you've been hinting at for months? She had no answer for that. That night, she tried initiating sex for the first time in months. I kissed her forehead and claimed I was exhausted. The shock on her face was priceless. The dynamic had completely flipped. Now she was seeking validation I wasn't eager to give. I discovered more about her exit plans through careful observation. Her browser history showed apartment listings, all in the expensive part of town she'd always wanted to live in. Email receipts for career coaching sessions focused on leveraging divorce for financial security. Not kidding. And text messages to Megan about starting fresh and getting what she deserves. What really got me was finding a saved draft email to a divorce attorney outlining how she'd been a supportive wife who sacrificed her career for her husband and deserved appropriate compensation. This from a woman who worked part-time at best, spent more than she earned, and whose biggest sacrifice was having to drive a Lexus instead of a Mercedes. Freaking delusional. That weekend, she watched me pack an overnight bag. "Where are you going?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but couldn't hide the edge in her voice. "Seattle meeting with the new team might extend to Sunday," I said without elaborating. "You've been gone a lot lately," she said, following me around the bedroom. "Is everything okay with us?" I looked at her directly. "That depends on what you want us to be." The color drained from her face. I thought she might confess everything, the list, the secret account, her conversations with Megan. Instead, she forced a smile. "Just missing you, that's all." I nodded and continued packing. Truth was, I was going to Seattle, but not just for meetings. I was looking at condos in a luxury high-rise downtown. Knowledge before action, always. The morning before I got back, she called me frantic. Turned out her car was making a weird noise and wouldn't start. She wanted me to cancel my meetings and come home early to deal with it. "Just call a mechanic," I said. "Use the emergency credit card if needed." "But I don't know anything about cars." "What if they rip me off?" "Then you'll have learned an expensive lesson about adulting," I replied. "I believe in your ability to handle this." I hung up while she was still protesting. A year ago, I would have rushed home to fix it for her. Funny how quickly priorities change when you see someone's true colors. But while I was in Seattle, I did something more important than house hunting. I hired a private investigator. My buddy from the military recommended him, ex-Special Forces guy who specialized in infidelity cases. I gave him all the info I had on Richard Davis and asked him to dig deeper. I told him money was no object. I wanted everything. When I returned from Seattle, I maintained my new routine. Gym in the morning, longer hours at work, minimal engagement at home. Amber seemed increasingly desperate for my attention, which I gave sparingly. The power dynamic had completely reversed. I focused on preparing our finances for the inevitable split. Started moving money to accounts she couldn't access. Nothing illegal, just protecting what was rightfully mine. Documented all our assets and her spending patterns. Created spreadsheets showing how much of our income went to her shopping, her Pilates classes, her girls' trips. 2 weeks later, the PI delivered his report. It was more damning than I could have imagined. Richard and Amber had been having an affair for at least 6 months. The PI had photos of them meeting at an upscale hotel downtown, receipts for jewelry Richard had bought her, and screenshots of their text messages that his specialist had recovered. In these messages, Amber referred to me as her starter husband and laughed about how clueless I was about her plans. Richard promised to take care of her once she was free from her marriage. They'd even discussed which neighborhood she should look at for her post-divorce life. But here's where it got really interesting. Richard had no intention of leaving his wife Nancy. In fact, in messages to his golf buddies, he bragged about having the perfect arrangement, a wife who maintained his social standing and a hot younger piece on the side who made him feel important. The PI also uncovered something I hadn't expected. Amber had applied for a home equity line of credit 3 months ago, using a forged signature that was supposed to be mine. The bank had flagged it as suspicious, but hadn't rejected it outright yet. She was trying to extract $75,000 from our home's equity without my knowledge. That was a felony. Armed with this information, I contacted Richard's wife, Nancy. We met for coffee while Amber thought I was at work. Nancy was understandably devastated, but also coldly furious. She'd suspected something was going on, but hadn't had proof. "What do you want to do about this?" I asked her. "Destroy them both," she said without hesitation. "Richard's prenup has an infidelity clause. If I can prove he cheated, he gets nothing." We formed an alliance right there. Nancy was the vice president of human resources at Amber's law firm, which gave her significant power over my wife's career. We agreed to coordinate the timing of our confrontations for maximum impact. The other person I contacted was Kelly, Richard's executive assistant. Through the PI, I'd learned that Richard had promised to promote her multiple times, but had instead given opportunities to women who slept with him. Kelly was furious when I shared what I knew and agreed to help us gather even more evidence from inside the firm. My last step was visiting Amber's parents. They'd always liked me and we'd maintained a good relationship over the years. I brought copies of the most damning evidence, not the intimate photos, but the text messages where she called me her starter husband and the documentation of the forged loan application. Her father, a retired judge, was visibly shaken. "This isn't how we raised her," he said repeatedly. Her mother cried and kept apologizing. I assured them I didn't blame them and explained my plan. They reluctantly agreed that Amber needed to face consequences, though they begged me to consider dropping the fraud charges if she cooperated with the divorce. "I'll consider," it was all I promised. "But she needs to understand the gravity of what she's done." During this time, I got a surprising call from Megan's husband, Dave. The PI had discovered that Megan was also having an affair with New York's brother. Ironically enough, Dave was devastated when I shared the evidence. He confirmed what I suspected. Megan had been coaching Amber on how to maximize her divorce settlement and had even helped her create the secret bank account. "These women think we're just ATMs," Dave said bitterly. "They have no idea what's about to hit them." After 3 weeks of my calculated distance, I decided it was time for the confrontation. I dressed in my best suit, the new one I'd bought from this high-end menswear store, not the off-the-rack stuff she always complained made me look average. I left for work as usual, but returned home unexpectedly at noon. As I expected, she was on the phone speaking in hushed tones to Megan. I stood silently in the doorway until she noticed me and scrambled to end the call. "You're home early," she said, looking nervous. "Is everything okay?" "We need to talk," I replied, keeping my voice even. The color drained from her face as I walked to her desk, opened the drawer, and removed the list. 15 reasons to leave me. I placed it between us on the coffee table. "When were you planning to discuss this with me?" She opened and closed her mouth several times before answering. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to understand exactly what's happening here," I said, maintaining eye contact. "Megan gets divorced and suddenly our decade-long marriage needs evaluation. Convenient timing." She tried damage control immediately. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." I interrupted calmly. "You've been planning your exit for months. Secret bank account, apartment searches, career coaching focused on maximizing divorce settlements, all while I was building our future." The shock on her face confirmed she hadn't expected me to know these details. "I was just exploring options," she stammered. "Sometimes I feel undervalued with the lifestyle we let's address your list point by point," I continued, refusing to engage with her emotional manipulation. "Insufficient income. I've secured a position that nearly triples my current salary. Embarrassing job. Funny. My new employer seemed to think my military background and security expertise are quite impressive. Not embarrassing." I methodically dismantled each accusation, watching her confidence crumble with every counter. Not with anger or defensiveness, but with facts delivered without emotion. "Your list reflects your own materialistic values and entitlement, not any actual problem with me," I concluded. "You've been plotting to upgrade to a wealthier model because it's easier than being grateful for what you have." She began crying. The universal defense mechanism when logic fails. "I don't know what happened to us. You used to care about what I wanted. I used to think what you wanted was us." I replied. "Now I see what you really want is status and a certain lifestyle, but you were willing to throw away 10 years for it." "That's not fair," she sniffled. "I just want what other women have." "Is that so wrong?" "What other women have?" "You mean the Instagram lifestyle that's mostly fake, or what Megan claims to have while she's drowning in debt and sleeping with married men?" Her tears stopped abruptly. "How dare you talk about Megan like that? She's been nothing but supportive. Professional courtesy. Is that how you see our marriage?" She was trying to regain control of the conversation. "That's how you treated it," I replied. "Like a business arrangement you could terminate with a pros and cons list the moment a better offer came along." The silence stretched between us. Finally, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "So, what happens now?" I removed an envelope from my jacket pocket and placed it next to her list. This was my ace. She opened it with trembling hands, expecting divorce papers. Instead, she found photographs of her with Richard Davis at the hotel. Screenshots of their text messages and a copy of the fraudulent loan application with her forged version of my signature circled in red. I can explain, she whispered, her face ashen. I'm sure you can, I replied. But save it for your lawyer and for the police when they ask about the identity theft and bank fraud. Police? Her voice was barely audible. Did you think forging my signature on a $75,000 loan application was just a minor transgression? I asked. That's a felony, Amber. 5 years minimum. You wouldn't report your own wife, she said. But she didn't sound confident. My own wife? I laughed without humor. You mean the woman who called me her starter husband to her married lover who plotted to take half my assets while sleeping with someone else? That wife? She began sobbing again. But this time it wasn't for show. I made a mistake, Jake. A terrible mistake. But we can work through this. There's something else you should know, I continued as if she hadn't spoken. Nancy knows everything, too. The color completely drained from her face. Nancy, Richard's wife, yes, the woman who happens to be vice president of human resources at your firm. She's quite furious about the whole situation. In fact, she's meeting with Richard right now, showing him the same photos I just showed you. Oh my God, Amber whispered. Oh, and I almost forgot. Your parents have seen the evidence, too. Not the intimate photos, of course, just the texts where you call me your starter husband and the documentation of your financial fraud. Your father was particularly disturbed by that part given his judicial background. She collapsed onto the couch completely broken. Why are you doing this? Just to hurt me? No, Amber. I'm doing this because actions have consequences. You didn't just plan to leave me. You plotted to destroy me financially while betraying our vows in the most fundamental way possible. I'm not going to fight to keep someone who has already decided to leave, I said. But I will give you one reason to reconsider that makes everything on your list irrelevant. What reason? She asked, fear and curiosity mixing in her expression. I know exactly what I bring to the table, and I'm prepared to walk away from it entirely if my value isn't recognized. Unlike you, I prepared for either outcome. The life you're planning without me won't look anything like the one you've imagined. You'll be starting over with nothing but debt and a damaged reputation. Once I'm done, the quiet truth landed harder than any emotional outburst could have. I'm going to a hotel. You have 48 hours to decide what you want. Not what Megan wants, not what Richard promised, what you want. And if your decision is to leave, I'll respect that. But understand this, there will be no friendship afterward. No chance to return when reality disappoints. I'll proceed with the identity theft charges, and I'll make sure every mutual friend knows exactly why our marriage ended. Clean break, permanent. For 48 hours, I maintained radio silence. No calls, no texts, complete disconnection. My phone lit up consistently with messages ranging from confused to angry to pleading. I read each one without responding. By the second day, her messages changed tone completely, from "How could you walk out like this?" to "I've been thinking about what you said" from "This is so unfair" to "I made some calls today." While she was panicking, I was executing phase 2 of my plan. I'd already secured the new job with triple the salary. Now, I moved funds to accounts she couldn't access, documented all her spending patterns, proving financial waste, and had a meeting with Kelly from HR at her firm. Kelly was grateful for the evidence about Richard and his pattern of sexual harassment. In return, she shared some interesting information. Amber had been bragging to coworkers about her exit strategy and how she was going to cash out of our marriage. She'd even been interviewing for positions at other firms, telling them she'd need flexibility for her upcoming divorce proceedings. All evidence of premeditation that would destroy her claims of being a supportive, sacrificing wife. As I suspected, things were falling apart on Amber's end. Richard had thrown her under the bus completely when confronted by Nancy, claiming Amber was the aggressor, and he'd been weak in the face of her persistence. He'd been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into sexual misconduct with subordinates thanks to Kelly's testimony about his pattern of behavior. Megan wasn't doing any better. Dave had confronted her with evidence of her affair, and she'd responded by throwing a lamp at him. He'd recorded the entire confrontation on his phone and already filed for divorce, citing domestic violence. The freedom fantasy architects were watching their own lives crumble. As the 48-hour deadline approached, I got a text from Amber asking to meet at our favorite restaurant, the place where I had proposed, a transparent attempt at emotional manipulation through nostalgia. I declined, suggesting a coffee shop instead. She arrived early, appearance carefully crafted, hair styled the way I once complimented, wearing the perfume from our anniversary. I acknowledged these details silently while maintaining a neutral expression. "Thank you for meeting me," she began. "These 2 days have been illuminating." I nodded but offered nothing, forcing her to fill the silence. "I made a horrible mistake," she continued. "The list was never meant for you to see. It was just me working through some thoughts with everything going on with Megan." "Whether I was meant to see it or not is irrelevant," I interrupted calmly. "You created it. You meant those things at the time you wrote them. That's the reality we're addressing. I've ended my friendship with Megan after confirming what you showed me was true." She said, "She's been filling my head with worst-case scenarios and luxury lifestyle fantasies for months." "Your choice of influences reflects your priorities," I replied. "But this isn't about her. It's about us. Have you made your decision?" She reached across the table, attempting physical connection. I kept my hands around my coffee cup, maintaining the barrier. "I want to save our marriage," she said, tears forming. I realize now what I almost threw away because I was listening to the wrong advice and focusing on stupid material things instead of what we built together. "What specifically changed your mind?" The question caught her off guard. She expected immediate reconciliation, not continued evaluation. "When you left, it felt like the floor disappeared," she admitted. "Everything I had taken for granted suddenly seemed precious. And then when I found out about the identity theft charges and that my parents know, Jake, I could lose everything." "Those are just consequences, reactions to getting caught," I said. "I'm asking what specifically changed in your understanding of our relationship." She inhaled deeply, recognizing this wasn't a simple make-up conversation. I understood that I'd been measuring our marriage against an impossible standard, that I'd been ungrateful and entitled. Her voice steadied. "And most importantly, I understood that you're not someone who needs me to stay. You're someone who chooses to stay despite having options. That's the difference." That was the fundamental shift I had been engineering for weeks. Not desperation to keep her, but demonstration that I would be fine either way. "I hope that's true," I said. "But actions will matter more than words from now on." She nodded eagerly. "I'll do anything. Please just tell me we can fix this." That's when I played my final card. "Before I decide, there's something else you should know," I said calmly. "Richard told Nancy everything when she confronted him." Her face went completely pale. "He showed her all your texts," I continued, "including the ones where you were planning your future together once you were free from your marriage. The ones where you called me your starter husband and laughed about how clueless I was." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "He told Nancy it was just a fling, that you were the aggressor, that you promised him you were already separated." Classic throw under the bus move. "Nancy forwarded everything to your boss. You've been terminated, effective immediately. Your belongings are in a box at security." Tears streamed down her face, but these weren't manipulative tears. These were the tears of someone watching their entire world collapse. "Jake, I can explain." "No need. It's all quite clear." I stood up. "I filed for divorce this morning. The papers will be served to you at your parents' house, where I assume you'll be staying since you can't afford our mortgage on your own." "You can't do this," she whispered, panic setting in. "Jake, please. I made a mistake. We can work through this." "You didn't make a mistake," I replied coldly. "You made a series of calculated decisions. Every transfer to your secret account was a decision. Every text to Richard was a decision. Every item on that list was a decision." "What about the identity theft charges?" she asked, visibly shaking now. "Are you really going to report me?" "Already done," I said. "The bank has all the evidence they need. They're quite motivated to pursue it since you tried to take out $75,000 against our home. My lawyer advised them I won't be obstructing justice any further." She broke down completely then, sobbing in the middle of the coffee shop, causing other patrons to stare. My career will be over. My parents will disown me. Please, Jake, I'm begging you. I leaned in close. You should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't good enough for you. Before you called me your starter husband to your rich lawyer boyfriend. I stood up to leave. Wait, she cried, grabbing my arm. What if I sign whatever you want in the divorce? I won't ask for anything. You can have the house, the cars, everything. Just please don't go through with the fraud charges. I looked down at her tear-streaked face. The woman I'd loved for a decade, who I'd built a life with, who I'd have done anything for. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. I'll think about it, I said. My lawyer will be in touch with terms. 3 months later, our divorce was finalized. She got nothing. Not the house, not alimony, not even her clothes. She signed away everything to avoid the identity theft charges. The terms of our agreement included a non-disclosure clause preventing her from bad-mouthing me to friends or on social media. Her parents refused to let her move back home, disgusted by her behavior. Last I heard, she was living in a studio apartment working as a receptionist at a budget law firm after Kelly made sure she'd never work at any respectable firm.